Hello and welcome to the first Building Access in Music Making podcast, better known as BAMM, the podcast. In this series of discussions, we will meet people who make music and explore what it is that disabled people and people with disabilities need to make their music. In this episode, I will chat with Jason Nolan, who's director of the Responsive Ecologies Lab at the Toronto Metropolitan University. He's also the instigator of this podcast and a BAMM collaborator and contributor. I'm Kenneth Emick. I'm the host and co-producer. I'm also a transdisciplinary artist, dancer, and a consultant on many things. Jason is a longtime friend and collaborator. We worked together to design the Relab, the facilities, the infrastructures, select the equipment, including a collection of sound gear and instruments, both scientific and musical. You'll hear us talk about that. It has been a big adventure getting to this, to release the first episode. Since this is my first podcast and a new adventure for me, there are many areas for me to improve. I recognize I've learned so much from recording a number of these interviews, editing them, learning the tools and the awarenesses, and putting this project together. This podcasting experience is changing me and my understanding of how I do things, like speaking into the camera or understanding my facial gestures. Or, as Jason encourages, it all comes with practice. Here's our discussion. I hope you enjoy it. Who is Jason Nolan in 2 minutes?
Holy cow. Well, somebody who's known Ken for like almost 50 years. First off, I'm autistic. I'm a card-carrying member of the Autistic Society of Canada. Actually, I'm not, but I am autistic. I'm a associate professor in the School of Early Childhood Studies at Toronto Metropolitan University. I am also co-director of the Responsive Ecologies Lab here at the university, and I'm a co-producer of the BAMM podcast.
Excellent.
Yes.
And so as you mentioned, it's sort of a disclaimer up front. Jason and I have known each other for a very long time and have had numerous conversations similar to this over the years, and we've gone many different directions, and they will continue. So, Jason, how did you end up in music?
Honestly, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Excellent.
I've been interested in music since grade 1 when we were taught how to play a plastic recorder, and I couldn't do it, and it didn't make any sense to me, and it bugged me. I worked really hard and begged my parents for a guitar, and they bought one, not knowing that it was cracked and wouldn't tune. And so I was told that if I was a good musician, I could play any instrument. Except you can't play a guitar with a broken bridge. So I literally went and got a job so that I could raise enough money to buy a bass, and bought my first bass. Don't even remember when, but it was pretty early on. I wanted to do music in high school, but they made me play trombone. Trombone does not make any sense to me. It requires fine skill movement to get to a point, and you have to repeat that. Can't do it. So I was so upset that I went to summer school and retook grade 9 music, and they let me play the saxophone there. So therefore I was allowed to play the saxophone. Got back to school, guy said, "You still can't play the saxophone. We only have one saxophone, and that Mr. Scales is playing it." You know who Mr. Scales is.
I know Mr. Scales.
Yes. And so I leased my own saxophone from Long McQuaid's Music and paid for it myself just so I could play saxophone in school. And I've still got the receipt for it, and I've actually still got the saxophone back here. And I still try and play it, and I still suck at it. I was such a bad musician. And don't forget, that would be in grade 10. I was in class then with your brother.
Excellent.
Yep. So he was like the best trumpet player in town, except for a friend of ours named Al. And I was so bad, I was the 4th saxophonist, but we only had 2 saxophones in the school. Mr.
-2.
Scales was first, and I was fourth, which I guess that's where this comes from. Too much rock for one hand, but I would just play the whole notes, and I couldn't read music. Even though I studied at the Royal Conservatory for 3 years and got my grade 3, I still couldn't read music. I'd look at it enough so I could figure out how to fake it at the right time. I now know, after I got my autism diagnosis, that I actually can't read music and can't remember music. So now I know why, but it was a struggle then. But I kept doing it. And I played bass, I played saxophone. Badly. But I just kept doing it. And that is what I think was the foundation for me, is that it was just to keep doing it. And I find that I'm, of all the people I know, the one who spends more time still playing music 50 years later. And I'm not much better, but after 50 years, I'm not as bad as I was in grade 9. But I always feel that I'm about as good a musician as any average kid would be after 1 year of lessons. But that's after 50 years of playing.
Right.
And so I've always been looking for tools and technologies that could help me understand and make sense of what I was doing with music, because I can't just do it the way anybody else did. And
Yeah,
that's really been, yeah.
I recall how important it was to you to taking the electronic music when you went to university, how that sort of shifted. You were more focused at English,
Yep.
and you took that electronic music course, and it just really did something for you.
Big time. The only reason I was taking English, I actually went to school for biochemistry, but I heard they had labs at 7 in the morning, and I wasn't doing that. So I asked which course programs don't have labs and multiple choice tests, and they said English, so I switched to English. I did take an electronic music course. Oh, a couple steps back in high school, in electronics, that we were both in that class. I built my first synthesizer. It was a Pi Gnome, which you can still find out about online. Built the kit, never worked properly because I really sucked at electronics too. But I loved it. And then when I got to university, there's a course in electronic music, and it didn't require you to be able to play an instrument. So I took it,
Excellent.
and they had all these great synthesizers, which I could never figure out, and these tape decks and things, which I could never figure out. But I was taught how to cut and paste tape. So you record something, and then you turn it backwards or upside down, and you splice it all back together, and you make strange things with it. And what I learned from then, that was how to actually compose. Not compose music, but intentionally organize sounds or words in a way that I wanted to. And that was fundamental, because that allowed me to separate the notion of being able to hit the right notes at the same time, remember things, to actually work with objects of sound and decide how I wanted to organize them. Weirdly enough, the most important thing is it taught me how to write in English properly, because I struggled with that. It said, oh, there's no thing in your head that comes out with nice sentences. It's about, you have words in your head, and how you organize them, just like cutting and pasting them on these pieces of tape, is how you actually compose words, sentences, ideas. So I realized that it was a practice-based process to compose with tape, but it was also a practice-based process to compose with sound or words. So the whole thing became more visible to me in a way that studying English never did. Because English, everyone assumed that you already knew how to do the most basic things, like understand how to write a sentence. I could do it, but it never made sense to me. So the electronic music taught me how to think about composition of text, of communicating with people or communicating with sound, through an intentional process of exploration of what's out there, and then figuring out that through lots and lots of practice, you just got better at things. Musical practice never really helped with me, but electronic music practice helped me, and that helped me then with my writing in English. And in the end, that actually, because I practiced that so much till I got good at it, could be applied back to what it means to practice in music. And as a result, I've got, well, you can see all my electronic music stuff back there, which I got back into a few years ago. It got me back into thinking about how sounds are organized, and how I could explore sounds in ways that weren't really tied to ideas that you have in your head that you try and apply on words or sound or people, but seeing what comes out of what you're interacting with and then deciding how you want to shape it to get a result that is interesting to you. So, from the sounds working up, from the words working up, not from the head working on the external world. And that
Mm.
is much more successful to me in everything.
So then what happened after that electronic music course?
Well, I pretty much failed it, which was interesting because I got the lowest mark in the class. I got a C plus in electronic music because I didn't grow up in a culture that understood European music, especially European electronic music. I remember sitting in class and there's this guest speaker who's this old codger who'd made no sense whatsoever. And I didn't know who and didn't care who John Cage was. He was
Mm-hmm.
just an old weird guy. So I wasn't impressed with what they were doing. I was only interested in what I was doing and learning with the materials. Because of that, the sounds I created weren't appropriate for electronic music. And so I bombed it. What was interesting was the second year the prof went on sabbatical, so there's no class. But what he did do is he gave a select group of students access to the studio for the year to do whatever they wanted. And even though I got the worst mark in the class, he gave me access to the studio. And it was a really important sign because it said to me that he knew that I was serious in what I was trying to do, but
Mm.
that as far as he was concerned, I sucked at it. But he was able to make that extra step and a leap, and that kept me going. And because stuff we'll probably mention later on, it kept me going right up till now in terms of my curiosity about electronic music and my curiosity about finding your way through making sounds and making words and working with them. Because in one sense, I'm an absolutely excellent writer. I'm really proud of how well I can write, but I'm always laughing joyfully at what I create sonically because in one sense it totally sucks real time, but I enjoy it and I find it so useful and meaningful for me to do it that I don't care. And that space in terms of music and composition, I think, is where I'd like more people to be at. Having the joy in making the music seriously to the best of your ability and not worrying that it sucks. There's a group.
And,
Sorry, can I just keep going?
and that's part of what BAMM is all about in building access in music.
Yeah, in two ways, because BAM, in one sense, is to help people who are pretty much old school in the way you're supposed to do things, but have physical limitations in terms of what they can and can't do due to mobility, due to dexterity, due to things like that. And we want to support that in the same way that I want to support people who just don't cognitively or fit in with how we make music for so many reasons, whether it's cultural, because in a sense we're also disabled by race and cultural backgrounds in terms of how we can make music. Uh, I'm interested in cognitive disability and challenges in terms of making music, but in order to be inclusive, I want to be supporting everybody in terms of how we can support their music making. I think I've told you, but on the 2 weeks, so it'd be July 16th, we're running in a workshop in the lab on deaf culture and music, bringing in linguists and researchers who are deaf to explore signed music and also the culture of Caravana in the Caribbean as it relates to the deaf community down there. Because I always realize one of the groups I'm still excluding has been the deaf community because I don't know how to even be inclusive. So I found people, how can we make it more inclusive? And so that's added some more thing to BAM that we never really had before.
That's wonderful. And so you've got a space in there though in your background where you didn't make music and you ended up back here making music. And how did that transition happen? You went away and absorbed it all and worked it into your writing.
Yep.
When you went through school and went and were teaching and you just went away from it and then came
Had
back.
to. There was nowhere to go. There was no way I could actually continue making sense of music. I did have guitar, and I played in bands a bit, but I really couldn't figure out how to do anything with it in a way that was just not confusing and upsetting. and I was at a space in my life where I was really had to focus more on work, and so the work went on wherever the money was. So as you know, I spent years working on virtual reality, augmented reality, um, game studies, knowledge media stuff, and it was because it paid. And it was only up until 2015 when we're building the Responsive Ecologies Lab, that some guy who's helping me out said, "Hey, you really used to be into music. How come you're not doing anything with audio in the new lab?" And so I said, "Yeah, good point. So go do that. Go get us audio stuff and see what happens."
Yep.
And as you know, that's you. It's all your fault. And you went and bought us, because you're helping me price out stuff for the lab. You went and got us audio stuff. We got a bass guitar in here. We got electric guitar in here. We got some amps, speakers, and some synthesizers. And that got me thinking again. Those synthesizers, none of those actually, they were Moogs. And so I started trying to figure out how to make sense of them, and I actually couldn't. And so I brought in somebody who knew how to do electronic music to do a 2-hour workshop to explain it to us. And that snowballed. And I got more and more curious about how to use electronic music in a more inclusive manner, because the one thing I realized with electronic music is it isn't predicated on Eurocentric scales, tones, chords, and music theory. So I said, oh, that's more inclusive. I wonder how I could do that with kids, how I could do it with me. But at the same time, I was also then starting to, because of the lab, start exploring the notion of practice and the practice of practice. So it wasn't that I practice guitar so I'll get good at it and can play cool songs. It's that to practice music is to practice playing music and practicing music, not about the performance aspect of it. And again, separating out those two. Playing music is something I do, but I'm not a musician. I don't perform. I'm not interested in performance. I'm interested in practicing the instrument as a daily, regular practice. And for the last 8 years, I've been practicing on average about 5 hours a week. And I keep practicing. Okay, how many days? I don't include synthesizers in my practice. I explore them. But how often do I spend an hour going,
Right.
just doing a physical practice without any intention of playing music, but just to explore the physical nature of the instrument? And that's
So,
really become central to our thinking, that we've been exploring inclusiveness, but also the practice of practice, and how that opens up exploration of materials, whatever it is, whether this, for me, it's sound making materials, that you practice because practice is what you're supposed to do as a person. You decide what and how, and it doesn't matter what it is, but we should maintain the practice of practicing something, not with working on something so you can perform it as an end goal. And that's become really central to my thinking out of all this. You learn by doing, you don't learn by thinking or listening to other people.
so if we take that further, I don't think you really extract or spoke much about your current position in dealing with early childhood education and
Right,
the
well,
idea of, pardon me,
yeah, I'm happy
and
to.
the idea
The
of
idea of,
practice
yeah.
and the idea of practice and um, how does that permeate your teaching of teaching teachers how to teach children?
So, good. I got hired here 20 years ago teaching, I was supposed to be teaching word processing and spreadsheets for early childhood educators so they can document children's practice. And I morphed that into courses in children and technology, concept development in science, concept development in math, children in play, and all those things, and taught them. But when we started bringing the sound back into the lab, I said, oh, I should start teaching creative arts. And strangely, it's the same time there's a big push for promoting women in STEM. So I said to my colleagues, we should promote women in STEM. So I'm going to stop teaching all the STEM courses and let's promote other people to do it. I'm going to start teaching creative arts, because there's not a lot of guys doing that either. And so let me do that because I was getting interested in music. So I took over the creative arts course, and started teaching myself children's musical instruments that are traditional: tin whistle, drumming, singing, creative movement, ukulele, so that I could help students who have no musical background become competent in playing those instruments with children. And it was great. So basically, that shift came. Originally, I'm curious about music, had to put it aside, got back into it, and then that's how it became the focus of my teaching. And now I teach all the creative arts programs in our school. So I've included like visual arts, plastic arts, body focus arts, and the music. And what we developed, my colleague and I, is we developed a curriculum and pedagogy that focuses on practice and documenting of practice.
Mm.
So it's useless for me to give students a 12-week course in all these instruments if they don't practice them. So now all of my students play um, all of the required instruments a total of 1 hour a week. And to do well in the course, you've got to practice every week for 1 hour. And you've got to then, at the end of the course, prove that you've got a basic competency through practice in working with children. So you get an A if you can say, well, actually, I say to students, you'll get an A in my course if at the end of the course I say, yeah, I'd hire them to work in my early learning environment doing creative arts with children. Basic competency through practice. And we developed our own system, which we haven't written up yet, but it's great. Students actually record themselves practicing for 1 hour every week, and they upload that recording, and that's proof that they actually did the practice.
That's
And
great.
so they are. So the whole process of all this helped me realize that it's the ability to develop a practice and practice through that practice. I love repeating those words. To build a basic competency, and that's what we want to achieve in creative arts and in children. We want them to feel that practicing is fun, practicing is interesting, and practicing has its own meaning, and it's not about just performing something for adults. So, and if
So it
they get
comes back
that,
to the idea of learning.
if you take learning as something for me that is accomplished through engagement with the physical world around you. In my science course, I used to say that, well, young children are scientists. I didn't even invent that term. They are scientists of the world around them. They physically engage with the world around them. They develop theories about the world around them. They test those theories, and they do that increasing levels of complexity over time. Like that's, I'm quoting myself because I always use the same phrases. I didn't invent the concepts. That's really coming out of a book by Cayley and Britton and the work of Constance Camy, who's one of Piaget's students. But the increased, so child doesn't read a book or take a course on learning to walk. They engage with the world around them. They decide that they start getting these theories of what it's like to stand up, and for some reason they seem to want to do it, usually because cookies and people are higher up, I think. And they start trying to stand, they start trying to walk, and those are exploring the world around them, developing a theory about how they might do it, exploring their body to see how they can make that work, and then through practice and practice and practice and practice and practice, they learn how to do it. And if we look at children as a model for us learning, it's the perfect model because it's one that is accessible to anyone because it's figuring out well, it's responsive ecologies. How do we respond to the world around us and how does it respond to us so that we can decide what we want to do and then come up with theories of how we might accomplish it through our exploration. So the theories don't come from our head. They come from the exploration of the materials around us. Children will stick things in their mouth. That really, grandma's glasses taste really gross. I'm not going to stick that in my mouth anymore. I wonder what sticks in my mouth that I would like the taste of.
Yeah.
Theory building, testing, and reflections. And next thing you know, they become a pastry chef. Because I really like the taste of things and textures of things. And so that as a foundation for our learning is always there until adults get in the way and tell us that we should be listening at the front of class. So what happens is children learn through physical knowledge. They then develop these mental models of what they think's going on to understand things, and they start to realize that this is a cup and this is a cup, or a thing that holds liquids. And this is also a thing that holds liquids. But they do them all differently. And some of them are easier to interact with others. And some of them have a lid on top so I don't spill it over as much. So I want my sippy cup, I want my straw. But later I want to hold this one because this is what big people do. That's all great. They don't need adults for that. They can figure it out on their own. Then an adult comes and says, oh, this is not a cup. This is a mug. This is a glass. This is a plate. And I'm more important, or you're more important, if you can actually use the right words. So we redirect children's attention away from physical engagement with the world and practicing with the world and experimenting to looking up at adults and waiting for them to tell you what's important. And that shift from physical knowledge of the world around you to your own ideas about the physical knowledge and the theories to social knowledge, which is waiting for somebody to tell you what's important and how to do it, is the biggest error in learning ever. Because you start seeing other people, usually older and bigger, as sources of knowledge, and you never see yourself as a source of knowledge. And you stop seeing your practice and your exploration as sources of knowledge. Now, the bass thing is, this is a perfectly good example. This is a Fender Mustang. No, it's a Squire Mustang. And what's important to know about a Squire Mustang bass is that Ken's bass is a Fender Mustang.
Yeah.
And this was made in 2020, and Ken's was probably made in 1972. So immediately we know that Ken is better than I am because he has a authentic bass with a great history, and and which probably cost you, I don't know, do you remember, $200, $300, $500?
Something like that.
Yeah. So that means that's probably worth about, except for the historical, it just an inflation rate, probably $3,000 or $4,000 in this money, not even counting the value of it as a historical document. This is $600. This is a piece of shit. So this is all social knowledge and cultural value. But the point is, if I'm just playing it, it doesn't matter.
It enables you to play it.
Yeah, I'm playing this thing because it's the thing I have right now. It is a cuter color. But this is an important distinction because we learn to value things according to other people's codes and not value them according to our own. And that comes in terms of what counts as good music making, what counts as, like some people I can't play because I don't have the right tools.
Yeah.
In terms of disability, that's a big issue. But all tools being equal, the tool you've got is the tool that you work with. And
right. You often refer to, or in our discussions, you've referred to musical instruments of having their own inherent disability, or being able to play it is the music has its way of requirements for you to actually play it.
Yeah, and some of us are disabled at every point in music making. And some of us can overcome those disablements. I'm not saying, because for me, stepping back, I work from a model that's sort of emerging. It's called DisCrit. It's the intersection of critical race theory and critical disability studies, because it reminds us that we're all disabled for different reasons by a dominant society. And we all benefit for different reasons in a dominant society. And it can be, we can be disabled because of age. Instruments aren't properly built for children. They get shitty instruments. They get plastic instruments. They get real instruments. Music is written by adults for children. Expectations of children's music is determined by adults. So they are marginalized and disabled by dominant music. But that can happen because of race, because your culture as well isn't respected in terms of music making. Your types of music you grew up with may not be respected. We still, as a world, we still see European music theory and European notions of excellence in music and how music is performed and the performance and audience. It's still Eurocentric. And it's still a very specific point in Eurocentrism. I come from a Celtic, Welsh and Irish background. Even that music isn't respected as the top of the top. So we have music as it's structured right now through that conservatory model and the dominant teaching models of music disable other ways of knowing, other ways of being, other ways of playing, and it's a standardized, corporatized notion of what counts. So that's all there. But those are what we got to work with. So when I'm working with children's music, music and children, I do not want children to learn adult music. I want them to learn how to make music through their own exploration of the materials, which is how just about everyone should anyway. But most of the children are forced into a regime that causes them to realize that certain people are good at music and you're not, unless you're one of the few who are allowed in. Music education usually is designed to exclude people, except the right kinds of people, because they play properly, they have the right notions of respect for teacher and authority in music making. Why, in a music class, should I shut up and sit down and wait for somebody to tell me which note to play? That's not teaching me music. That's teaching me how to adhere to participate in a regime of control that doesn't reflect my interest in playing music. And you're interviewing me right now. What the hell
Right
are you
now.
doing? I'm playing bass all the way through.
Yep.
And I don't care what I'm playing. I don't care what it sounds like. Well, I actually do. There's certain notes I don't want to hit right now, like not that one. I don't want to have that note right now. But I make music as part of me just communicating with people. It's not like I'm doing two separate things. I'm talking to you and I'm playing notes. I don't know what notes. I'm just moving my hands around and moving things. But it calms me. It makes me, makes me less uptight, and it's fun, and I like it. And why shouldn't we always be playing music? Rather than waiting for the right place and the right time and the right teacher. 1, 2, 3, go.
Yep. And
What more?
it's really fascinating to hear you do that. And I know you've talked before about um, being autistic and having that little shiny thing that you like to spin around and look at to keep you occupied. And that's what it's like. And it actually goes back, and I think about those things you made when you were working with cardboard with children
Yep.
with autism, the rockers to keep them going. So there
And
was the physical stimulation.
and that's where I learned a lot of this because people talked about fidget cubes and toys to play with, and I just found them too hipster and too, again, one size fits all. But when I was down in New York, I saw a group called the Adaptive Design Association, and I spent a number of years learning from them about cardboard as a tool to support building custom adaptations for disabled children that they do down in New York, and they're amazing. But they also had what they called an autism rocker. And it was basically a flat surface. We can post in a picture of it later, right?
We could include one.
Yeah, and so it was a little chair, a little thing you sit in the ground. It was designed to rock back and forth. And so it was designed to rock. It was a tool that said rocking is important. Movement is an important thing. Adults, if they got chairs like this, they're always rocking in them, no doubt. But the idea was that if everyone has a rocker, and rocking is normalized, then the child who has to rock to engage isn't going to be seen as weird. It's normal. So the classroom chair disables them. Giving everyone an autism rocker actually levels the playing field because you can sit on them without rocking. But since there's a tool there that allows for rocking, the classroom is now including somebody who needs to move to engage. Now, as an adult, I cannot play bass in departmental meetings. So I would have my computer there and something else to stimulate me. Because it seems to be okay if you're in a meeting taking notes.
Yeah.
But it was funny because during COVID, meetings went online in Zoom. So suddenly, I could play guitar during department meetings.
Excellent.
So great. Keep the microphone off. Keep the camera right here, right? Nobody can see unless I go like that I've got it on. I'm muted. And when I needed to communicate and engage, I would just hold the button, say what I needed to say, and go back to doing it. Although sometimes I'd forget. And so I all of a sudden, Jason, we can hear you playing guitar again. Sounds okay. And it was embarrassing. But again, I wouldn't do this in a corporate environment. But I do have a disability accommodation with the university for being autistic. And there's certain things that are obvious. One thing is the hat, mon chapeau. I hate having a hat off my head. I don't like hats per se, but I hate having a shiny head. But I perceive everything so widely. Like I almost see 380 degrees all around me. So I actually have to, basically, it's just lowering. Ooh, now it looks silly. It has to lowering the amount of light that's coming into my face so I can pay more attention to whatever's going on right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things I do is to help me pay attention to what's going on right in front of me. The hats like that, the guitars like that, or the spinny things like that. I am in a position to modify my environment to reduce the things that would exclude me from participating. And I think that's really inspired me in terms of as this whole BAMM thing's developing, as I'm getting back into inclusive music practice, is most of the things that are disabling people can be addressed and engaged. And we can improve the conditions to help people do what they want to do. And I start from a position of what are your goals and interests and needs? And how can I take the tools I have available to help you achieve them? So not what do I want to do for you? I've got tools. How can I help you do what you need to have done? And that for me is a fundamental way of thinking about all the work we do, but also what's going to happen as BAMM develops and grows. And the podcast, which makes this podcast for me interesting, is it's a way for us to start asking questions of people who spend a lot of time in music and thinking about music and playing music and trying to play music how they want or succeeding, to ask them again and to share with others, what are your goals and interests and needs, and how can people help you, or what needs to be done? And then BAMM itself maybe help to address some of them, but in a sense, getting that language out there and helping people realize that the goals and interests and needs around musicking are what we should be talking about.
Right, and it's less about the idea of genius, as you've mentioned,
Yes.
of genius and that sort of packaging that's put around, as you said, conservatory type music
Yeah,
education.
that there's an excellence that you have to achieve, and people who achieve that excellence are geniuses in what they do, and that they're creative. I do not, well, for me, the way I teach it, genius is a concept that is really problematic. And if you look up about the development of the concept of genius in the 20th century, it is tied in with what I would consider to be racist and eugenics thinking. And you can find other people who know it's not like that. It's really about romantic notions of creativity. I find romantic notions of creativity to be Eurocentric and problematic. Who gets to be creative? Who gets to be a genius in that thing? It ain't the guy shoveling shit or the woman cleaning your socks. So
Yep.
those terms are exclusive. And usually what's seen as genius can be unpacked in much more practical and pragmatic ways that also relate to practice. Did Glenn Gould practice the piano 24/7? Pretty much. So, what was he great for? His ability to practice. Because he'd be nowhere with anything else he's got if he wasn't willing to practice. Yo-Yo Ma, what does he do? He practices a lot. And he loves it, and he's into it. I wish I could remember the name of that book. It might even be the Range book next behind you. Was that the one that talks about practice?
By David Epstein.
Okay, then maybe not that one. That's an important one too, because that may be the one where he talks about how many different things Yo-Yo Ma had to do before he decided he wanted to play the cello. Is that in that book? Sound familiar?
I don't recall.
Okay, if not, it's in another one, and I'll find the link for it. But they go through how many. There's one famous tennis player, and it was amazing because his mom was a tennis coach and hated playing tennis with her son. And he didn't like tennis because that's what Mom did. He wanted to do other stuff like play soccer. And he sort of fell into tennis. And his mom said, he just plays wrong and he doesn't take lessons and he got into it and he practiced it and he made it up to the world level. And I like that, people finding what their goals and interests are. Their goals and interests and needs I mentioned before. John Locke said that a person who doesn't know what their interests are is a danger to themselves and others.
That's great. I know that you have been working with Robert Fripp, and it has informed your way of teaching, I think.
Yeah, and let's put working with in context, because I have had a little bit of communication with him. I went down to one of his workshops in Argentina, and I had to make sure that the staff were going to be inclusive for an autistic individual. So I emailed his archivist saying, who I've talked to in the past, saying, how's this going to work out? I've been to some Fripp things and it's been problematic. Am I going to get enough support so I can be included? Because you talk about inclusion. And Fripp personally got back to me and said, yep, he said, my doctor's kids are autistic and I'm used to being around them. I know exactly what you're talking about. I'll check in with everybody, which was really nice. But my interest in Fripp goes back to 1975 from an album that he did with Brian Eno, who has also really influenced my teaching, called No Pussyfooting. And it was a very early use of tapes. We're back to tapes and cutting and splicing tapes and tape looping. And they took work that other people had done in the 50s and 60s, particularly probably Paulina Lovero's work and Terry Riley's work and Morton Subotnick's work at the San Francisco Tape Music Center in the 60s. And Eno developed a system because he's into systems thinking, and got Fripp to play along with it. And it was a series of loops, where you'd play something, you go, and it would go in the loop. And then you go, and it would go in the loop. And as those things kept going, you'd start soloing over it and playing over it. And the looping really appealed to me because you did something, and then you played it back and did something else. There's no score, there's no notation, there's no memorization. You're in the moment doing something and then seeing how it fits together. And so that really inspired me. And then in 83, I saw him lecture at the University of Toronto on this system called Frippertronics. And it really inspired me to see somebody actually doing that sort of thing. His level of musicianship is astounding, but his willingness to work with the materials and put himself in potentially failing in uncomfortable positions really was interesting. He says in one recording I heard, he says he's going to try something out. Oh, he's playing on Midnight Special or Saturday, Midnight Special television show, and he says, "I'm really impressed that the producers have let me on. I'm not sure they're not sure what's going to happen, and I'm not quite sure either. But in the spirit of hazard, let's see. The spirit of hazard was moving yourself into a hazardous space where things could go wrong. Oh, I live in that space." He gave a lot of tools to help take what disables me in music and put it aside and focus on what I can actually do how do I move beyond what's disabling me to the things where I can do things. And he's writing, he's got a great book. Most of it's philosophy, which I can't engage with because I don't have a brain for that. But a lot of it is very aphorismic. Aphorismic? Anyway, they're aphorisms, and that are very useful tools when I'm teaching. His one thing is, I love it, you can play any note you want, as long as it's the right note. And when I heard of that, first time I thought of you. Because it's a very Kenny thing to say. Because the statement is left hanging, and it's so pregnant with possibilities and meanings that you have to think on it. Play any note you want, as long as it's the right note. How does anyone know what the right note is? Fripp doesn't necessarily know what the right note is. I don't know. The toddler doesn't know. It is an inclusive approach to it. if you can find the note you want to play, and you can play it how you want it and when you want it, it's the right note. The only note that's wrong is when you want to play this note and you play this one instead. But then again, you can go back to Eno, who conversely says, consider your mistakes as unexpected intentions. Voila. Yep, I meant to do that. And as jazz, you'd say from jazz, playing a wrong note once is an error. Playing it 3 times, however, is improvisation.
Yeah. What's really interesting when I hear you, the way you speak about these things, is there is the space between the children's education and then somebody else who's taken work further in music. And then there's that space of growing up where there's that, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? This is what's expected. So as a child, you start having expectations put on you until you get to a certain point as an adult where you can get rid of those. Would you?
Yeah. And this is brilliant that you brought this up, because children have to learn how to mediate themselves in terms of expectations, society, and adults. Otherwise, you get designated as oppositionally defiant. You may end up breaking the law. And for racialized children, it's even worse. So I'm informed a lot by issues, or some articles I've used in my teaching are like the dangers of playing while black. For black youth, especially males in the U.S., who there's an expectation that play even and music has to conform to a white middle-class Eurocentric notion of what is proper, and that disables people. Whether me, who appears cisgen white, as much for cognitive difference as it does for racial and cultural differences, and it's not inclusive when you center one view, no matter what that view is, as what's considered to be the apex of what's possible. There's a brilliant educator and musician, Phil Ewell, in New York area. Link's important. He's one who did a really interesting paper on basically the racial problems with the European music theory. And there's some wonderful work out on that. I always include him because he teaches cello, and he's an expert, I think, in like Russian opera. He's totally in that space and loves it. But he sees the racial problems as a black man for working in that space and what it means for other people. And so it reminds us that even if we have an affinity for what's considered the dominant thing, we have to actually always be able to play multiple sides of things. Children should not lose their inner sense of what their goals and interests and needs are. Well, they have to also learn to conform to what the dominant cultural environment says should be your goals and interests and needs. And I go back to Eno for that one again too. Eno says when you have options, choose both.
Right.
And again, Eno is a record producer, has always been somebody who put himself in difficult situations, or music producer, and challenged his own ways of doing things and thinking. Yet as somebody who worked with existing sounds and materials rather than somebody who is an instrument player. Fripp, on the other hand, is all about the specific practices and techniques. And so I love playing those two off each other, and they're both friends, and they record together still now, but they're completely different. And I love the fact that the two people who inspire me most about music making do it completely different, and have completely different attitudes towards things, and still work together. And I think that reminds me that there's no reason why I can't be playing with technically proficient musicians who can read music, write music, and understand it, if they're willing to do it in an inclusive manner that makes space for me. So I don't want to ever discount any type of music making. What I do want to do is decenter musics from, decenter, say, Eurocentric music or any dominant type of music at that time with another type. It's got to be jazz, because jazz is all it is. Fine, that's important to you. But we've got to decenter that in any sort of learning and social environment to make space for a more inclusive notion of what music it is. And people who aren't interested in BAM are people who aren't interested in making music inclusive. They've got their own one style that they would like to evangelically perhaps impose on the rest of the world as what's proper.
That's wonderful.
Hope
It's
that
really interesting that you have these ideas and you can transmit them to teachers who will be teaching children, as I mentioned earlier,
yeah.
and see how that percolates. What sort of time scale do you expect something to happen, or do you?
Well, what's interesting is I'm primarily, my courses are required courses. So it's not like somebody signs up to do this. They have to take this course or they don't graduate. So I get a lot of people, I'd say 90% of my students have no music backgrounds, have no particular interest in playing an instrument. And at the end of the course, they may not either. But what I'm saying is, in order to work with children, you need to have core competencies in the creative arts, or you're not competent. And why are we giving whatever mark you get or degree you get if you can't demonstrate that you have a basic competency, not in terms of playing a music instrument well, but in order to do meaningful sonic experiences around children and sound. If you can't do that to the best of your ability, you shouldn't be working with children.
That's great.
And I've got some students coming in and say, of course, we've got music all over the place. And I have other students who say, because of my beliefs and faith, I can't do any musical activities. I've got the full gamut. And I'm dealing with that right now, trying to help a student who says, I can't engage in these practices because of my cultural and religious background. I have to respect that too and make space for that. And I have some people say, I grew up playing piano at the Royal Conservatory and I know what I'm doing. Those are two ends of the continuum. There's room for us all. But I mean, I want to fill in the space in between with a very diverse notion of music making. The funny thing is, I try to decenter the course in music from a European background. I don't teach Western scales, but I do teach chords, the basic chords. I have to. So I have to learn 4 chords because you can play hundreds and hundreds of pop songs using those 4 chords. All those chords are using Eurocentric music theory. I can't stop that. That's what they are interested in. That's what they hear. So I can challenge it in my lectures, but I'm not going to say you can't do it because that engages them. We use instruments, though, that I consider to be associated with pre-cultural music making. Drumming starts with, in the womb, hearing the heartbeat. So it's been around as long as humans have been. So you can't tell me that drumming is something that has a specific cultural background. Good drumming may come from specific cultural backgrounds, but drumming itself doesn't. Creative movement is something that we know has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Moving your body creatively, rhythmically. Singing, every child sings. The first sound that comes out of a child's mouth, if they can make sounds, is a scream. That is singing. It's a non-articulated form of communication of emotion. The oldest musical instrument we have is somewhere between about 70,000 years old. I've read that it was not made by a modern human, but by Neanderthals. And I've read that it was tuned to a pentatonic scale. So how can I say a pentatonic scale? Which culture owns the pentatonic scale? Nobody. So we use tin whistle because that, for me, it's a European instrument, but it was really a poverty instrument. It was an Irish instrument from the 19th century. It was not something that was made by rich people. And I've used it camping for digging latrines.
Multi-purpose.
It's a thing. My particular one. I use ukulele because ukulele has an interesting tradition with Portuguese fishermen. It's not a highbrow instrument, and the fact that what made the ukulele become internationally popular was because the last indigenous king of Hawaii thought it was cool. And he really said, I like this instrument, I want this, and he pushed it. And you can find newspaper articles from that week. It said something like, Um, a group of Azorian fishermen have come over to Hawaii and have brought their new musical instrument with them, and it's been very popular. And that happened. And it was a Canadian guy who actually decided to take the ukulele and bring it into education. And it spread all around the world. It's not a highbrow instrument. It's a fisherman's instrument. It's strung with fishing line. It's a working class instrument. The ukulele, so ukuleles like that, the tin whistles like that, singing. These are all, none of these are classy, i.e. bourgeois, i.e. middle class, or well-cultured instruments. They're available to everyone, and most cultures have some version of them. A local stringed instrument, whether it's made from a gourd or, whatever, it doesn't matter. Those are instruments that exist and can exist outside of a dominant culture. So that's me taking a position of what counts as where we should be looking for music. If a child plays the ukulele and decides they want to come on and do classical guitar, I think that's great. They decide they want to take up fishing traditions, that's great. I'm not trying to tell them where they should be going with their music. I'm trying to make sure the music doesn't immediately disable them. And that they can find their own location in it. And a lot of people are just going to want to play pop music or serious classical music and stuff. Fine, but I'm not the one who put them on that path.
Right. You're showing them the bigger picture of what music is.
Yep. And if you let toddlers, and I've done this, if you bring a real toddler, like 18 months to 2-year-olds, into a room with a whole bunch of musical instruments, and I've done this, what are they going to start doing? They're probably going to take the drumsticks and start beating the hell out of the ukuleles. Why wouldn't you? And I've been in there in my music classroom, and some of the early years educators brought in the kids to visit, and they were most upset. No, you're supposed to hold it like this. No, you're supposed to do this. And I just, stop. You're supposed to do what your body and your interests allow you to do. And for these ones, it's picking up the ukulele and hitting it with something or hitting something with it, because that's where they are in life. And so when I was working with synthesizers, I actually spent a couple of months in an early learning classroom playing bongo drums. I'd sit in the corner and just play bongo drums, not teach anybody anything. And it was an excuse for me to be there and watch the kids. And very quickly, the kids just started ignoring me. I had 2 rules. 1, I wouldn't teach them anything. And 2, I would never play the bongos in 4/4 time. Because I think 4/4 time is bull. It's not natural. If you watch kids walking, they do not walk in 4/4 time. They walk in 5/4 time. Why? Because they can't walk very well, so it's a bit of a stagger. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or if they're really getting it going, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fall over. So I was curious. So they would come over and hang out. Sometimes they would want to take their dinosaurs and play on the drums. The only requirement, again, was no magic markers on the drums. But, and I watched them and how they interacted with the physical environment around them and what sounds they made and what things they did. And then I've been thinking towards how to create musical experiences that reflect the way they're already engaging with the environment around them. And I've got 2 projects, unfortunately, that get hung up for other reasons. One's called a sonic throwable object, which is an object that makes sounds when you throw it. So it's designed to be thrown. And it makes even better sounds if you throw it at people. So it has to be very soft, of course, because children aren't allowed to throw things. But if it's part of a music program, they might be allowed to throw things. And the idea would be, as it's thrown, the internal microprocessors would know whether it's spinning on axis, how hard it was thrown, where it is in its arc, and it would create sounds that reflect that physics of its movement in space. And so that's what we're working on. We've made a lot of headway, but we're sidetracked on some other projects. And the other one is to make a sequencer that would sequence sounds, but was using the same building blocks, round and triangle shape and square building blocks that children play with. The idea is, if they, instead of putting them down on a board to build shapes, put them down making shapes that would actually generate sounds. But the sounds themselves would be predicated on something inherent in that object. A triangle wave, a square wave, and a what's the other one?
A sine wave?
Sine wave are all inherent in those physical objects. So when they put something down, it made that sound. They would actually be seeing the wave. They caused that wave to happen through them taking that wave and putting it on the board. I'd like to see how that worked out.
And correlating the physicality of object to
Yep.
sound.
It's also very multimodal because you're generating sound through seeing, touching, moving, placing, rearranging, and sound comes from it. So what would happen? And so that project's going forward, but I'm waiting for some guys I'm working with to finish the synthesizer in the background, and then I'm going to work on and I have to get my shop bot working. Waiting for somebody to fix the shop bot.
Yep.
That's you. But yeah, so
Absolutely.
I know, but I know it's not your fault. We just have to find the time. But idea to build these large, and again, children's musical instruments should be built for their hands. Children are small, but they usually require big things to interact with. So it should be this big. And I did some experiments with using sliders to control synthesizers with toddlers, and they totally got it. They could move something. So they moved something. They saw what they did. They saw what they heard. They moved it again. They theorized on what would happen, and they could then make choices based on their understanding of it. No language, no nothing. Interact with a physical object, see what it does, see what the sound, and then reproduce it. And one time I had a toddler in here who didn't speak any English, and so she was explaining to her mother, and I think it was in Urdu, what she was doing. And the mother was then explaining it to me to see if it was right. I said, yeah, she understands completely. So you don't need to sit there and teach children things. You give them tools to explore sonically, and in ways that they can increase in complexity over time as they start thinking about it.
So that's such a great way that you are doing that, because it encompasses so much about what BAMM is and your teaching and how it's all wrapped together in that understanding of the world. And I know that
Yep.
we could sit and we will continue these conversations.
Yep.
And I think through these podcasts, we'll continue to have these intermittent discussions and see how other people we speak to interact with their instruments, and we can reflect upon what it is they think and where the work is going in the Responsive Ecology Lab and the bigger picture itself.
It would be really neat to check in periodically and to be able to reflect back on all the other podcasts and what we've learned from them, because some people are going to come up with things that, yeah, that was nice what Jason said, but he's totally wrong because of this, this, and this. It's like, oh, good point. Because if you don't share your story, nobody hears it, but if they hear it, luckily they might actually have some new insights that you didn't actually have. I wouldn't be doing any of this music stuff or anything if it wasn't for other people coming along and saying, yeah, cool, Jason, but you're doing it wrong because you didn't think of this. And either, no, I'm right because of this, and then somebody else would tell them. It's always a cascading structure of failure, but in increasing levels of complexity, just like a child. I come up with a theory, I test the theory, I reflect on it. Wow, I got this figured out. Yeah, but what about the next thing?
And that's what it is about the next thing.
Yeah, and I can't wait to start hearing what other people are going to have to say during the podcast and how that's going to inform BAMM as it's developing over the next 10 years.
That'd be wonderful. So we can continue on, and you can continue your playing, and we'll have the conversation later on as it continues.
Yes. One of the people I don't know if we put on our list is going to be Kirsten Snowden, who's going to be doing the workshop in the lab next week on deaf and sign music, because she's doing some amazing stuff. That's and I don't know what she was doing in the past, but I knew I was asking her 5 or 6 years ago how I could deal with the fact that my course in my teaching isn't inclusive, because we don't include deaf music and sound making at all. And I think she just quietly, all of a sudden, about a year later, popped up her first movie that she'd done on deaf sign music. And it was like, oh my God, didn't know anything about that or how to bring that in. So now we're at this point that BAMM and the lab are supporting this workshop, which is going to be focusing on deaf sign music and also deaf culture in the context of carnival in the Caribbean. So getting that sort of, and getting those discussions inserted in here, I think would really be interesting as well.
That would be fantastic. And so I think we'll just wrap it up there. There's so much more we could go on and chat about. You know, you playing, Alan Strange, etc.
I was making the point because you suggested that this would be a good outro or intro music, so I'm playing it as the outro right now.
Excellent. Live. We have live music on the podcast.
We should have everybody do some live music.
Absolutely.
Even if it's
Everybody should
pre-recorded.
play.
Yep. Well, then you have to start playing then.
I do.
On the podcast. Or
On
sing.
the podcast.
I haven't heard you sing since 1980.
Well, everything can change.
Okay.
We'll leave it there.
Yep. Okay, thanks, man.
Thanks for the time, and thank you for the discussion. To be continued.
Yep. Oh, you're still recording, are you?
I am. The BAMM podcast is hosted, recorded, and edited by Kenneth Emig. It is produced by Jason Nolan, Kenneth Emig, Richard Marcella, and Andreas Bellucci at the Responsive Ecologies Lab at the Toronto Metropolitan University, or better known as the ReLab at TMU. The BAMM podcast is produced with funds from a Google Award for Inclusion, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and the Canadian Foundation for Innovation. Thank you to Randall Prescott and Stefan Powell for providing the music at the beginning and the ending of this podcast. We will have conversations with both Randall and Stefan on future episodes, something to look forward to. Thank you for listening, following, and subscribing to the BAMM podcast.